Welcome. I am Dr. Chelsea Dakers. I'm a naturopathic doctor with a clinical focus in natural fertility and holistic hormone healing. And today, let's talk about proactive perimenopause care. I get asked a lot if I prescribe hormones and if I treat menopause. And the way that I approach perimenopause looks a lot different than what you might be hearing in other places. So if you're not sure if you're perimenopause or you have a sense that it might be coming up for you shortly, I want you to know about a few things. So right now, the most predominant way of approaching menopause care is hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. And this is a growing area in conventional medicine and alternative and allied care systems. There's a very big need. There's a ever-growing group of women that are transitioning from that mother to crone, and either physically or metaphysically, whether they've given birth or not, there's this transition that is part of moving through perimenopause, moving through menopause. It's a portal of transformation, and there's a growing number of people that are moving through that window. And there is also a very significant group of people who actually cannot function without HRT, hormone replacement therapy, who are transitioning perimenopause or are actively in menopause. And so I do want to address that piece as well, because this is a very recent phenomenon. It's this modern conundrum that women are finding themselves in, where there is very severe perimenopause or menopause symptoms, which basically is rendering them incapable of functioning in normal everyday life without hormone replacement therapy. And with hormone replacement therapy, they actually are able to function again and feel normal again. So in that way, I am absolutely so grateful that hormone replacement therapy is available for those people who are deeply struggling in perimenopause and menopause. And also, we need to look at this from an eagle eye perspective. What is going on? Because this is a very modern phenomenon where people are needing HRT to move through perimenopause and menopause. And to give some context, I want to rewind a little bit, because it's important to understand, how did we get here? How did we get to a place where we have these growing numbers of women who cannot function without hormone replacement therapy in perimenopause and menopause? So if we rewind to changes that happened fairly recently, women were entering the workforce in larger and larger numbers. Again, that's a very modern concept. And what happened there is, slowly over the decades, there was this outsourcing of the homemaker. No one was really tending to the home anymore, because now we've got dual income earners, and that's how a lot of families were structuring their lives in response to various cultural, social, and economic pressures. So women who were historically tending to homes, they started to leave the home, and they were contributing a lot of their life force energy to the workforce. And that has fundamentally shifted the course of human reproduction. So we're in this scenario that 1 in 5 couples are experiencing an inability to conceive. So again, another really interesting marker where we're looking at how are we doing as a group from a hormone perspective, from a reproduction perspective. And those two statistics, the fact that 1 in 5 couples experience an inability to conceive, and the fact that there is this growing number of women who cannot function in perimenopause and menopause without hormone replacement therapy. Those two statistics are deeply related. and it's part of the story that I'm kind of unpacking here. So we had this shift, women leaving the home and entering the workforce and contributing their life force energy into this in this new way. And so there is this fundamental shift that has been happening certainly in North America, and I would say most industrialized nations, where this shift is happening for people who historically were in homemaker roles, and now they're transitioning to the workforce. And what happens there is a subtle yet very significant impact on the way our hormone system is functioning. And I'd like to bring in a concept from traditional Chinese medicine, one of the most empowering ways of knowing that I have in my toolkit to start to orient to holistic hormone healing. I really do believe that if you've never come into contact with traditional Chinese medicine, I really don't think that you are able and equipped to participate in what is called for right now when it comes to hormone healing. It's an ancestral way of knowing. They have been researching and cataloging so many aspects for thousands and thousands of years, and it's an extremely, extremely important perspective. And I want to bring a little insight from traditional Chinese medicine, and that is thinking about a very, very foundational basic concept in traditional Chinese medicine, which is yin and yang. Yin and yang. Some people say yang, I say yang. So there's these two different forces. If you've ever seen the yin yang symbol, right? There's white and black, and there's a drop of black in the white, and there's a drop of white in the black. One cannot exist without the other, and they're in this beautiful, harmonious flow. In traditional Chinese medicine, yang is that masculine energy. It's that doing, being, going, achieving. That's yang. That fiery, that's hot. And this yang quality, it's in all of us, and it's permeating all life. And that is in contrast to yin. So that's the black. It's the coolness, it's the darkness. This is our cooling system. This is our receptivity. This is our intuition. This is our peacefulness waiting to receive. And so knowing this polarity, this dance between yin and yang, is very important when we're thinking about what is going on, when we're looking at the landscape of perimenopause, menopause care, and also fertility. All of these people exited the home and began giving their life force energy to the workforce. Clocking in, clocking out. Going to work, being on time, participating in productivity of all of these other endeavors. All the millions of different things that you can do when you enter the workforce, all those ways. Most of that is very young. The workforce is very young. And so all of these women left the home, went to the workforce, and really were very expressive in yang. Now, yin and yang have to always be in balance. And what traditional medicine offers us is that most of the symptoms of menopause, vaginal dryness, night sweats, hot flashes, for example, those cardinal signs of menopause, those are all manifestations of yin deficiency, So let's unpack that just a little bit, because we're going deeper into the layers of traditional Chinese medicine. So I'm going to say that all again, just so we're all here together in this concept. Menopause, some of the cardinal symptoms like vaginal dryness, night sweats, and hot flashes are all symptoms of yin deficiency. So that's that cooling, dark, receptive energy. When that is depleted, that's what I mean by deficiency. So when that is depleted, symptoms like dryness, night sweats, hot flashes emerge because the cooling system is diminished. It's no longer able to cool. And so we get these very kind of hot, dry symptoms. And this is what happens when women, and I'm using the word women here because I identify as a woman, and it's been very empowering for me to use that language. And another time I'll share more about that. And most of the people who I have engaged in clinical care with have identified with women. I am absolutely aware that some people who are born with a uterus and assigned female at birth do not identify as women. So this conversation is absolutely relevant for you as well. If you are traversing the landscape of perimenopause and menopause, have a uterus, but do not identify as a woman. So I do want to acknowledge you in that. So women, people assigned female at birth, they entered the workforce, and they've been doing that in greater and greater numbers over generations and generations, to the point now where we have a very significant number of women who are in perimenopause who cannot function without hormone replacement therapy in that transition. And this is unprecedented. This is a very, very modern phenomenon. And so we have these generations of people over and over again. So for example, my mother, single mother, was very immersed in the workforce. Her mother, single mother, very immersed in the workforce, and so on. It was not, I'm trying to think in my lineage who was just a homemaker. So not my mom, not my grandma. Could have been my great grandma. She definitely had a job, but it was, technically she was employed by her husband. So let's say my great grandmother, born in France, emigrated, was a French-speaking immigrant, came here just before the crack of World War II and started a whole life again. And she was the last person in my lineage who technically her only employer ever was her husband. But that was because they had emigrated. I do believe prior to her emigrating, leaving France, I do believe she actually did have a job. Yes, she did. She was a secretary. And then they emigrated. And she then became more of a homemaker. So it would have been my great-great-grandmother, possibly. No, it wasn't even her. Gosh, that's so crazy. So it wasn't even my great-great-grandmother because she worked in a factory. And I have a story about that, but that's for another time. She worked in a factory, so it was, I don't even know the name of the last woman in my mother's lineage who did not have an employer. That's really fascinating. I've actually never connected to that before. But in this moment, that is an example in my lineage of how many generations of women in my family, in my mother's line, had entered the workforce and were in very, very young roles. Very young roles. Factory worker, extremely young. Office work, young. There's just this there's this doing, being, achieving, productivity-oriented way that basically is inevitable when you're part of the workforce. And me as an entrepreneur and having a decade of post-secondary experience, I know a lot about young. I know a lot about young, a lot about achieving, a lot about doing. And so we are in this collective opportunity to start to remember receptivity. Receptivity. That is that principle of yin that has to be present to balance yang. They have to be present. One cannot be present. One cannot exist without the other. And that's the beauty of this universe, is there's always balance. Always balance. So we have this ever-growing group of women in their perimenopause and menopause years who cannot function without hormone replacement therapy as they move through that portal of transformation. And we've talked about the historical context that is contributing to why we as human beings have gotten ourselves in this place. There's layers to this conversation. I'm unpacking one of them. So please know that this is not the exhaustive investigation of this particular topic. This is a layer. TBD. More TBD. To be determined. And thus, coming to my final point here, which is being on the screen this whole time. This approach is proactive perimenopause care. This approach that I'm sharing with the world is proactive perimenopause care. Now, I just gave you a huge preamble to support that statement, because that statement is bold, and I want you to have context for why I feel confident in making a statement like that. As women were entering the workforce and people were no longer tending to the home, we were slowly diminishing our fertility, that yin quality. There's something very yin about taking care of the home, tending to the cleaning, tending to the hygiene, tending to feeding ourselves, and then resting. Literally just resting, taking breaks when we need breaks. Whereas in the workforce, you don't really get to take breaks when you want to take breaks. You get a scheduled break, and that break is mandated by some regulatory body, and it's usually almost always inadequate. And guess what? If you're sick, you force yourself to go to work. If you're grieving, guess what? You force yourself to go to work. You're menstruating, you go to work. There's so many opportunities that we would have historically taken rest, but because we had entered the workforce and we had consented to these contractual relationships of productivity, we opted out for these natural opportunities to rest, to process, to integrate, to receive that yin quality of life. And we've kind of opted out of that a lot, because we've designed our workplaces in ways that don't facilitate that kind of living. And maybe they will. So maybe this is a moment where we can all dream that dream of a workplace that you get to be sick. You get to take time off when you need it. When something happens in your life, you get to grieve. When you're menstruating, you can choose not to go to work. Different things like that. So that would be possible, and that would be starting to augment the workplace to bring in more yin, to bring in more balance. But at this time, leading up all of these generations back and back and back to my ancestor, whom I will try and learn your name, but I actually do not even know your name, who was the first person who actually was not giving all of their life force, all of this yang energy, over and over and over and over again, depleting the yin. I don't know who they were, but it's been many generations now. That's also part of the point that I want to drive home here is it's not just my lifetime. Our capacity for easeful hormonal transitions like perimenopause and getting pregnant, these sorts of transitions, they are informed and affected by previous generations. Our ovaries contain eggs, and those eggs were actually present in my grandmother, right? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about this multi-generational impact that our hormones are showing symptoms, are telling stories about. It's multi-generational, so we have to look back in retrospect. It's part of holistic hormone healing. And so what happens is we've prioritized these lifestyles, we've entered into the workforce that is extremely young, there's very little yin now in most of our lives. And so what happens is we get blood deficient. We get stagnated and we get blood deficient. These are also concepts from traditional Chinese medicine. Blood deficiency is such a critical concept. It needs many other conversations to really understand that. But for this moment, blood deficiency is a complex concept where we're thinking about digestion, hormone status, iron status, nervous system, all swirled into this beautiful, elegant concept of blood in Chinese medicine. When I say the word blood, I am not using the word blood as the biomedical conventional model would use that word. Totally different. Same word, different meaning. So we have these people who have been just doing, being, achieving, going in our very outward, entrepreneurial, working lives, and that yang has been burning and burning and burning, and that yin has been trying to stay in balance, right? The yin is trying to balance the yang, and by the time you get to perimenopause, sister, you've got no yin left, right? You've got no yin left because it's been trying to stay in balance with this overabundance of yang for so long. And so I see a lot of people come in and intersect with my work and my clinic when they are blood deficient. And this is kind of the preamble when you're not really perimenopause yet, but you're in your reproductive years, so in your bleeding years, your menstruating years, and you've got hormone problems. There is always some kind of blood deficiency. And blood deficiency is basically the precursor to yin deficiency. So by the time you keep living this yang lifestyle and now you're blood deficient, and then give it a decade, one more decade, and sister, you are now in full-blown yin deficiency, because in Chinese medicine, blood is yin, yin is blood. And you get to perimenopause, you're so yin deficient, now you've got vaginal dryness, hot flashes, night sweats, and this transition, this sacred portal of transition is now a hellscape. It's not, it doesn't feel sacred, it feels like something you're just trying to survive. And unfortunately, that's happening for a lot of people, and it's increasing in prevalence, how common it is to have a devastating perimenopause and menopause transition. And my heart and my love goes out to all of you sisters who are feeling and experiencing this. And I'm so sorry that we had to go through this arduous path to come to really understand this and learn this as human beings, but here we are. So we entered the workforces, we worked our ass off, yang, and we depleted our yin. And by the time we got to the reproductive finish line, aka perimenopause, menopause, we ran out of yin, man, and we got these crazy symptoms. So my entire approach, my body of work, is sharing what I've learned about how to create the conditions for hormones to heal naturally. And how do we do that? We have to cultivate yin and blood. Have to cultivate yin and blood. The way of yin, baby. It is the way of yin. You cannot, if you were born into this female body that bleeds, you must honor yin. It is a serious lesson for us right now, because our culture, our social systems, our families, our workplaces, our communities demand that we be more yang. Unfortunately, hate to break it to everybody, but our biology knows better. and we have to embrace our yin. We have to embrace that. That's how we have easeful menses. That's how we have beautiful, delicious, healthy hormones. We don't have period cramps. We don't have fibroids growing in our uterus. We don't have cancers growing on our reproductive organs. We don't have devastating pain in our pelvis. You get what I'm saying, right? We have so many hormone problems going on right now as a group, and we need to embrace yin, and we need to know how to build blood. Building blood, again, TBD, a very important conversation. Holy guacamole, such an important conversation. Not for this moment, but a very important conversation. So let's review where we've been and take away a couple of key action steps. So we've talked about how there is a growing number of people who are transiting perimenopause and menopause who cannot function without hormone replacement therapy. And this is increasing prevalence, and this is a very modern phenomenon. And we're looking at the bigger picture and the root cause of why is this happening. We've talked about the dynamics of yin and yang, and we've talked about how yang lifestyles, for example, entering the workforce has greatly affected our capacity to have easeful hormonal transitions. And we've also talked about how building blood and cultivating yin are critical for people who are on a hormone healing journey. And ultimately, what this is leading us to is the conclusion that this approach that I'm sharing with people, how to cultivate yin, how to build blood, how do we create the conditions for our hormones to heal naturally, that is proactive perimenopause care. If you're wondering how to prepare for perimenopause, it starts today. It starts today, and it's not taking a bunch of supplements. It could be, maybe for some people in some scenario, but I'm telling you right now, how we create the conditions for hormones to heal naturally is that we have to change the way that we live our life. There's a way that we can learn how to do this. You don't have to blow up your entire life and sell everything and go live on a plot of land with no electricity and no internet. I mean, you could, but that's not the conclusion that I've come to, because that's not realistic for most people. So we have to be realistic with what we're actually at, and what are we going to do about it, right? How are we going to get to the place where we don't actually need hormone replacement therapy when we transit through perimenopause and menopause? Because we've prepared for it by the way that we live our life. And we do that by preserving fertility. Preserving fertility is proactive perimenopause care. I'm going to say that again because this is really the concluding concept, is preserving fertility is the way that we create proactive perimenopause care. Because when we are preserving fertility, we are staying in balance with yin and yang. Staying in balance. We're offering those opportunities for yin, and we're offering those opportunities for yang, and they're collaborating and moving through us in our life in a state of balance, and that ultimately preserves fertility. Even if you have no interest in creating more humans in your life, totally fine. You are valuable with or without children. So this is not about making babies right now. This is not about that. When I say preserving fertility, I mean you are a fertile being. When you are fertile, this is the natural state of your physiology. You were designed to be fertile, whether you want to have children or not. We have to come to terms with the fact that if you were born into this physical manifestation that has a uterus, that has ovaries, that bleeds, you being fertile is part of your true nature. And so even if you don't want to have children, creating the conditions that preserves that fertility. And by fertility, I mean proper functioning of the HPO axis, the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. That needs to be fully functional for you to be in the totality of who you are. And so we can preserve that function of your innate physiology by the way that we live our life, having this balance of yin and yang, regardless if you have children or not, because that truly is immaterial to this conversation. And you can do that your whole life, your whole reproductive years, staying in balance with yin and yang. And by the time you get to perimenopause, I promise you, it's a breeze. I promise you it's a breeze. There is literature and anecdotal evidence from communities who still live in more of those gendered roles where there's someone who is staying home and tending, and there's someone who goes out and does the very yang work. This research that I'm citing right now, it was looking at Mayan communities, and they basically have no documented menopause. Like, they just stop bleeding. It's not this tumultuous, devastating, grueling process, because they've lived their entire lives a certain way, which has preserved that balance of yin and yang. Now, in North America, where we've been prioritizing industrialization and the productivity that is associated with that, technological advancements, we've all been, over the generations, becoming more and more and more yang in our nature, and becoming ultimately more and more and more yin deficient, to the point now where we have this alarming number of women who are literally not able to function without hormone replacement therapy in perimenopause and menopause. That's very severe. That's very, very severe to have that kind of intensity in your experience. And infinite gratitude to the creators and makers who have, gifted us these compounds, either synthetic or bioidentical. Well, they're both synthetic, but bioidentical or exogenous hormones. I mean, if they're a gift from the creators and makers, because truly there's a very significant group of people who cannot function without them. But we need to realize that, this is a symptom. It's a symptom, and it's telling us something about our culture. It's telling us something about the way that we live our lives. And so this body of work that I'm sharing with you, all the things that I've learned about how to create the conditions for our hormones to heal naturally, for fertility to emerge naturally, they're all interwoven, all of these conversations. So ultimately, this approach that I'm offering is proactive perimenopause care, because we're starting to learn about creating the conditions for our hormones to heal naturally, finding that balance with yin and yang, so we don't go into those states of blood deficiency and ultimately yin deficiency that have these devastating impacts like vaginal dryness, night sweats, hot flashes that make life almost unbearable. So much love to all my sisters who are transiting that. We love you, we're thinking of you, and for all you who are listening to this and you're not in that transition yet, I hope you can love yourself in a way that allows you to start to access those opportunities to bring more yin into your life. Cooling, slowing down, resting, reflecting, receiving. Please cultivate those opportunities, because that is how you create proactive perimenopause care. So much love to you all. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and we will talk soon.